Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Welcome so much. And thank you, Karim, for taking our opportunity here to host you today. And thank you that we're part of your European tour. Yes. Thank you so much. So, Jörn and I, we are colleagues, you could say. Many times I'm your client because I'm listening, I'm hearing what you're writing, what you're warning us about. So this is a very international panel and also an internal, so to say. So let's start right ahead with this importance of password management. We talked before a little bit, Karim, and you told me that it's very important to not only talk about password management, but also have in mind that identity and any password management are intertwined, so to say. Why is that? Why is it important to think like that as an enterprise?
I mean, if you think about everything that we do on a day-to-day basis, digitally, the way we interact with things, we are put in a position on a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour, day-by-day basis where we're constantly using our digital identities to use services. Mm-hmm. I do it as a consumer. I do it multiple times a day in business. And each of those identities are rarely the same, right? Sometimes I'm logging into a consumer site, watching a movie, buying something. Other times I'm at work accessing a very important, critical piece of information that is intensely confidential. And the reason it is important to link the two is because each of those interactions with the digital asset represents a different identity in terms of usernames and passwords or single sign-on elements or even passkeys. But the ability to figure out how to manage all of those identities, because they all represent the physical me, it's just that I have many virtual identities that I present to these services. And it's important to be able to connect the two and figure out how do we effectively, securely, and most importantly for all of us, easily manage them, because it gets quite complicated, which is why people do things like use the same password everywhere.
Right. And we should add that LastPass also names itself as a cloud-based identity provider with expertise on password management, right? So this is also the official connection to your expertise. Right. So Jörn, when you hear Karim speak, how do we connect this identity and password management here at Handelsblatt? How would you call it?
Well, actually, the connection now is via the tool, the password manager tool. We are using LastPass as a password manager tool for all our employees, just to make sure that management of password, management of identities is somehow within the ranges of policies we trying to give to make it as secure and handleable? No, that's not the right word.
Able to handle, so that you can handle it.
You can handle it. And let me just emphasize that the identity, or management of identity, is paramount. When we have patched the last firewall, the last vulnerability, and made everything that IT and IT process secure, we still have the identity, which has access to data, which has access to information. And if we don't manage this identity and make it as secure as possible, everything else is not necessary. Yeah. So this is really a very important part of building a secure environment and making sure that everybody is, or data, the company data and the private data, is safe. And I don't know how many accounts you guys have on different platforms. Last week I found out that I have like 2 more Gmail accounts, which I, a few years ago, just created for testing or whatever. Yeah. And if you have like a central tool which handles all your identities, it's much easier to find out what kind of identity you have, what you are using, what was the last time you used, is the password you're using there is still safe, do you use duplicate password, whatever. So you need some kind of a management tool which helps you.
Yeah. So let's say we understood that we need safety, let's say we understood that we need identity management, right? Still there is this an environment, and let's talk a little bit about this, where attacks can happen, right? You witnessed that as also an organization,
yes,
a quite severe one. Could you describe what happened at LastPass?
Yeah, so we did. We had a pretty severe, I joined the company as CEO about 3 years ago, and about 2 months after I joined, we had a pretty severe attack that came in from a quite sophisticated actor, and we quickly discovered the incident. It took us quite a bit of time to get all the details behind it, but ultimately what we ended up doing was using that moment to make a number of investments in the company across the board. I mean, the severity of the attack was pretty high. The implications was pretty significant, and it gave us an opportunity, like many companies when they go through this, to really think about what it is that we want to do to ensure that two things happen. Number one, we get information out to everybody, so we ended up doing a 25-page blog that detailed everything. And then the other thing is, over the last I would say 2.5 years, and just to give people a sense, we are about 1,000 employees. We spent about $13 million to invest across different aspects of security because we felt like we were going to have a target on our back forever by virtue of what we do and who we are. And that was really important. So we made an extremely sizable investment. Today we have a security team, a dedicated security team of about 63 people, which compared to other organizations of 1,000 people is quite large, but we felt extremely important given who we are and the data that we hold.
Right. And let me ask you there, and then we get to you again. So, I mean, is LastPass, so to say, an foreseeable target because you have so much information, and so it is more likely that you get attacked? Or does it show that even LastPass gets attacked, you know, because maybe the attackers would maybe think that you have quite some security measures already? What's the message? You know what I mean?
I think it's a combination of both, honestly. It's also important to remember what we ultimately discovered was that the threat actor was a pretty sophisticated attacker. So people that want to get into organizations, if they have enough time, money, and patience, ultimately will. I've been in cyber 30 years, and we often say, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when and who it is that it's coming after you. So the opportunity is to build the defense, but then get the visibility as quickly as possible so that you can enable your organization to quickly react.
Right. Jörn, I mean, there are some comparisons we could say, you know, right? HMG, Handelsblatt Media Group, more or less 1,000 employees, but I don't think we have a 63.
I wish.
Yeah, we're not staffing 63 people to talk just about security. How often do we get attacked?
Well, every day. I mean, this is common. I mean, everyday attacks on multiple levels with different actors. So it's almost. It would be unnormal if there wouldn't be any attack in a certain day. So this is just standard procedures.
Okay. And would you say there were some severe attacks as well?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, the adversary is trying to get into accounts. They're using phishing tactics or social engineering tactics, trying to take over accounts. That's the ultimate goal. If they have the account, they can use the account and try to spread out into the system. So it's really mandatory to have really pretty secure accounts, pretty secure password, and pretty secure login methods. So yeah, that's necessary.
Right. So let's sum up the conversation we had right now. Right? We said that identity policy is important to understand, more than just password management. Then you understand the environment, it's full of attacks, right? So now we saw even LastPass gets attacked. We as a media house, we get attacked. So what do we do now, Karim? This question goes to you. I mean, maybe an organization, I don't know, what many different enterprises sitting here in the audience, maybe you are somewhere in between these two organizations, maybe you're smaller, maybe you're bigger. So what are your recommendations? If, let's say, we understood the task, we understood the environment, what to do. What's the biggest challenge for organizations? How to act?
I think one of the things, as we talk a lot about these types of topics, one of the things I often recommend is I think that people need to step back and look at their organization and assess the type of the target they are for attackers. Because not everybody in this room is of equivalent value to an attacker. It depends on the business that you're in. It depends on the information that you hold. What's been really fascinating to watch, I would say, starting in about 2008, 2009, what happened is you initially had a lot of attackers attempting to get into many places. And then all of a sudden, people started to invest a lot in cyber. And then the attackers realized that the barrier to entry was pretty high. So they would spend a little bit of time. If they couldn't get in, they would go away. Because 10 to 15 years ago, it took a lot to build an attack profile. Today, there's a lot of automation. So as an attacker, I could try to attack with automated tooling everybody in this room and see where I could get in, and then assess if the target is actually a worthwhile target. Now, in the next 3 to 5 years, AI is going to make that even easier, right? I know there's a lot of marketing hype about AI, but there's also a lot of reality about using AI to further automate attack patterns. And so as an organization, I think you have to quickly assess what type of target you are, and then map your security policy, your security controls, and security investment that's aligned with how big of a target that you are. That's one of the things that we often recommend to be able to assess your profile.
So self-consciousness, you could
Correct.
say, about what role you play in this environment. Jörn, what would you say is the biggest common, I would not call it mistake, but let's say the biggest challenge we are facing as Handelsblatt? Is this maybe the education of us, the staff? Is it maybe budget? Is it staffing?
All of that. All of that what we heard during the day is really would be helpful and necessary in certain levels, of course. But if we come back to identity, I think it's really important that we can have trust in the identities of our employees. Because at the end, we need to build processes built on these identities, like zero trust processes, where we can decide on who logs in, the credentials, and trust these logins, and from there build the path into our systems and to the data. So this starts with the identity, and all what follows up, all security measures, all login measures, all access measures are dependent on the identity. So this is really paramount for us.
So it's
and by the way, we see a lot of identities, which company identities, which are used on private platforms in WhatsApp, in Signal, in Facebook. So there it starts. You get phished there, you get social engineered there, and from there they try to get into the company.
Yeah. All right, so before we talk about the last part of our conversation we thought about, I would like to give you the opportunity. Wenn Sie Fragen stellen möchten, natürlich sehr gerne, auch auf Deutsch, gar kein Problem, ganz wie Sie möchten. Können auch noch mal kurz überlegen. Okay, then you can just think about, and then we will turn to the last part we thought about could be interesting for you to hear. Let's talk about Karim, future trends. So where we're heading at, right? I mean, we could expect, maybe some experts say that also identity management, there is a certain automation when it comes to it. Are there any AI agents who help us doing this job? Maybe passwords in the future are not the way we secure our information process. What's your what would you say? What's your perception of the future?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you look at the identity space, there's an opportunity to improve the security of how identity occurs, and that's not just a future aspect. It's actually, you just have to look to the past. In the last 10 years, there's been a lot of automation for machine-to-machine authentication. So we don't see or hear much about it, but as you build applications and you have microservices in the cloud, as an example, they're constantly using interfaces to authenticate to each other billions of times a day. Those are passing authentication tokens and other mechanisms, and those are automated. And so the future for identity is that last mile, that last weak link, which is us as human beings. Because I have my identity, I have my username and password, but there are new mechanisms that are being pushed by the FIDO Alliance around passkeys, so passwordless. How do I use the biometric, it could be my fingerprint, it could be my face, and pass it all the way through to the service I'm logging in? It could be Facebook and Signal, it could be Amazon, or it could be a corporate application. So you're starting to see passwordless authentication come in, but like every trend in technology, particularly in cyber, it takes quite a few years to make it ubiquitous, but I think we will eventually get to the space where I don't longer have to remember usernames and passwords, which will make it more secure, but also a lot easier.
Right. But maybe, Jorn, also this is then a new way of being attacked, right? I mean, or will it be more secure in this way?
Hopefully it will be more secure, but there's always opportunities. I mean, it's at the end it's software developed by humans, and there's always errors or bugs. So there are some known ways already, but this takes a really sophisticated attacker and a lot of effort. But so yeah, it's not 100% secure.
Yeah.
Never. I would never say 100% secure anything.
Doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist, right? I'm looking to the audience. Yeah, and there's a question. Choose the language. I can translate if you want. Yeah.
Thank you. Have you ever tried to scan a face 3D and to print it 3D and use it for identification?
I have a 3D printer, but that's not something I've tried.
But that's when you say, okay, you are passwordless and you don't have a username, and you use your fingerprint or your iris or the entire face, as my MacBook is doing, for example. Then I could simply scan my face.
Yes.
For not much money you get this, and I print it out on a 3D printer, not the highest quality, and I put it in front of my computer. Would that work?
Yeah. I mean, in theory, as technology advances, sure. There's been, for probably a decade now, there's been a good ground base for identity. There are these three things that we often say. To get bulletproof identity, you have to have something you have, something you know, and something you are. So the biometric is what you are, but something you have could be dual-factor authentication that includes your mobile. So I would have to scan my face, or in this case, my 3D printed face, but also have something that allows me to do a second factor on my mobile. So, or MFA, or some future form of MFA that perhaps is even easier. But I think that's what people have to assess. How much of a target are you, and how much of identity do you want to advance? And that's important to note, because at the end of the day, you also want to make the experience easy for the user.
And there's another one. Yeah, we take this one as well.
What do you think about WorldCoin, you know, having this iris? It was a project where they, you know, this WorldCoin.
WorldCoin.
WorldCoin,
yeah. Because I think it's quite fascinating, you know, because the iris is unique. And if you had something installed on your PC like that, and it always catches your iris, I wonder that those tools are not more popular at these times, because there are apparently facilities to make it more secure than using passwords. But it takes really long, from my opinion, until those techniques come true.
Yeah, I think there are many capabilities today that are in hardware form that require some interface, a camera, a microphone, a fingerprint scanner. I think in my opinion, what I've observed is that the lack of adoption is largely focused on the fact that there isn't ubiquity of these devices everywhere. So it's hard to imagine a world unless there are cameras everywhere where we can scan our faces. And until that occurs, I think the phone is probably the first device that I've seen that almost everybody you come into contact with has. And so I think that is probably the place where people will start to unify on using biometrics. We certainly probably all use biometrics now and Face ID to log to the phone. But I think that holds a lot of promise to extend that to almost every application that people use in the next few years.
So, gentlemen, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I would like to give a warm round of applause for the two experts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We stay here and we go ahead. Bitte schön. Nora, du machst weiter.
Stay here?
Dran. Bitte.